Welcome to the May 2019 edition of This Month in Payroll. I'm Rowan Geddes, National Leader of PwC's Payroll Consulting practice. In this month's edition, we will cover our response to the federal election, outcome of the Fair Work Commission's annual wage review, a review of the Fair Work Ombudsman's 2019-2020 priorities, changes to awards, and the BlueScope Steel case. But first, the federal election. The federal election has been run and won by the coalition government. Workers' rights was one of the key themes in the election campaign, defined by 4 ALP policies aimed at increasing the support provided to workers. These were 1. Protect penalty rates, 2. End the use of permanent casuals, 3. Crack down on wage theft, and 4. Addressing the gender pay gap. So, with the election of the coalition government, does this mean that business as usual is resumed, and that terms such as wage theft are consigned to the scrap heap? No, not necessarily. While it is true that the coalition adopts a far more non-interventionist approach to industrial relations matters, the issue of employee rights and entitlements is still entirely relevant from a legislative, judicial and regulatory perspective. From a legislative perspective, the coalition is providing more funding to the Fair Work Ombudsman and the Australian Tax Office, has agreed to introduce criminal sanctions for wage underpayments, and has introduced casual conversion clauses into modern awards to allow casual workers to request conversion to permanent positions. From a judicial perspective, there are active cases to determine whether a long-term casual employee should be treated as a permanent employee entitled to leave, the Skeen and Rosado cases, and defining what is a day for the purpose of leave entitlements, the AstraZeneca case. And from a regulatory perspective, the Fair Work Ombudsman remains very public and active, wanting big businesses to be better, while the Tax Office is becoming more proactive in pursuing underpaid superannuation guarantee entitlements now that the promise of an amnesty has expired. So, despite the return of the coalition government, it is fair to say that a focus on employee entitlements and workers' rights must remain at the forefront of employers' minds. The annual wage review. On 31 May, the Fair Work Commission issued its annual wage review decision for 2018-19, in which, having consideration to economic and labour market considerations such as GDP growth and unemployment, it determines the rate at which the national minimum wage should increase this year. This will have an impact to any employers who pay their employees with reference to the national minimum wage or a modern award. It is estimated that about 21% of Australian employees, 2.2 million, have their pay set by an award, and that about 1.7%, 180,000 of all employees, are paid at the adult national minimum wage rate, with more employees paid at junior or apprentice trainee rates. Noting that the Australian economy has performed moderately well despite the recent fall in GDP growth, and that employment has continued to expand, the Fair Work Commission identified this review as an opportunity to improve the relative living standards of the low-paid by awarding a real increase in the national minimum wage and the award minimum wages. Accordingly, it announced a 3% increase to both the national minimum wage and also modern award minimum wages, effective from the first full pay period starting on or after 1 July 2019. The new national minimum wage will be $740.80 per week or $19.49 per hour based on a 38-hour working week. All employers paying employees under a modern award should be aware of this 3% increase. In addition, employers covered by an enterprise agreement or other award-based instruments should also check to see whether they need to increase their minimum rates of pay. For example, employers covered by these type of instruments may need to change the rates of pay if their instruments contain base rates of pay that would otherwise be less than the new corresponding award base rate of pay, or includes a clause that states that pay is linked to the outcomes of the review. Employers may also need to change rates of pay due to individual arrangements which reference an award rate. The increase doesn't affect those employers who are already paid more than the new minimum wage. However, it does apply to employees who aren't covered by an award or an agreement. The Fair Work Ombudsman's priorities. This month, the Fair Work Ombudsman, Sandra Parker, announced the regulator's priorities for the year ahead, outlining a stronger approach to enforcement. Ms. Parker referred to the community's expectations that its regulators will hold industry to account, and also referenced the comments in the Migrant Workers Task Force report, which stated that the Fair Work Ombudsman A. increasingly risks being viewed as a mediator rather than a regulator, and B. has been too cautious in its use of enforcement tools. Ms Parker noted that Parliament has given the Fair Work Ombudsman increased powers and more resources, so it is incumbent upon the Ombudsman to send a strong message of deterrence to would-be lawbreakers. She also noted that the Prime Minister and the new Minister for Industrial Relations, Christian Porter, have also stated that a priority for the government is on law enforcement and adherence with Australia's industrial relations laws. Of particular note for our client base is the Fair Work Ombudsman's perspective on larger businesses. In her speech, Ms Parker stated that the bar should be higher again for larger, high-profile businesses that self-report non-compliance to us. This means that the default position of the Fair Work Ombudsman will be that, in the case of a larger business who self-reports, a court-enforceable undertaking with the Fair Work Ombudsman would be required as a minimum, and these enforceable undertakings will require the employer to meet the cost of getting their underpayments verified by experts contracted to the Fair Work Ombudsman. In addition, employers that self-report should also expect to make a contrition payment. Of course, for businesses that are identified outside of self-reporting, the consequences will be far more significant. From our perspective, we are seeing this change of tone manifest itself in our interactions with Fair Work for our clients. Fair Work is expecting that large employers will use good electronic systems, i.e. no paper timesheets, have clear internal accountabilities for ensuring that employees are remunerated correctly, access professional advice in relation to award interpretation and payroll compliance, and have strong governance processes for handling employee concerns. The Ombudsman then outlined the priority industries and issues that it will focus on, being fast food, restaurants and cafes, horticulture and the harvest trail, supply chain risks, franchisors, and sham contracting. Vulnerable workers will also continue to be a priority for the agency, and the hospitality industry received a special call-out, as there have been almost 3 times as many tip-offs to Fair Work from this industry than any other industry. Changes to awards. A reminder that there are also penalty rate changes to factor in, effective 1 July 2019. These are, in the Hospitality Award, Sunday penalty rates drop from 160% to 150% for full-time and part-time staff. In the Pharmacy Award, Sunday penalty rates drop from 180% to 165% for full-time and part-time staff, and 205% to 190% for casual staff. In the Fast Food Award, Sunday penalty rates drop from 135% to 125% for full-time and part-time staff, and 160% to 150% for casual staff. And in the Retail Award, Sunday non-shift work penalty rates drop from 180% to 165% for full-time and part-time staff, and 185% to 175% for casual staff. Sunday shift work penalty rates drop from 195% to 190% for full-time and part-time staff, and 220% to 215% for casual staff. There was also a change in the Real Estate Award, whereby employers will no longer be able to employ part-time employees as commission-only salespeople from the first pay period on or after 30 June. As there is no grandfathering of the clause, this will affect all current part-time commission-only employees, as their payment method will need to change to the hourly rates provided by the award. The BlueScope Steel case. Last year, the Federal Court, in the case Australian Workers Union versus BlueScope Steel, held that hours which are worked beyond fixed hours may be so regular and normal that they become ordinary hours of work for superannuation guarantee purposes. This decision was contrary to the position taken by the Tax Office, and it was appealed. The Tax Office, also seeking to intervene, became a party to the proceedings. That appeal was heard before the full Federal Court this month, and the decision was reversed. The facts of the case were that BlueScope Steel paid some of its employees annualised or aggregated salaries for working up to 43.5 hours per week, 38 hours plus 5.5 additional hours, to meet the needs of the business. Some of these employees were also rostered on to work on public holidays. The employees' annualised or aggregated salaries were calculated to include payment for not only the base salary, but also additional payments for the additional hours and public holidays. The question posed before the primary judge was whether the payments included in the annualised salary for additional hours or for work on public holidays would constitute ordinary time earnings. Ordinary time earnings means the total of earnings in respect of ordinary hours of work. Given the employees' working weeks were extended to 43.5 hours, the question then that the full Federal Court considered was whether this meant that payments for the additional 5.5 hours constituted payments in respect of ordinary hours of work. In upholding the appeal, Chief Justice Alsop considered the industrial agreement under which the BlueScope Steel employees were remunerated and found that their salary was made up of a base rate and a component which absorbed all additional payments, including public holiday loadings and payments for additional hours worked outside of normal rostered hours. Therefore, although the employees were almost certain to be working greater than 38 hours, Chief Justice Alsop found it was wrong to conclude that earnings in respect of ordinary hours of work would be anything other than earnings in respect of the 38-hour week. A key takeaway of this case for employers who operate similar annualised salary arrangements is the need to be clear in the governing industrial agreement as to how the components of the salary are calculated, specifically calling out components of pay that are paid to reflect additional hours of work or public holiday work. In this regard, the advice is similar to the advice offered after Workpac versus Skeen for casual loading, where casual loading is paid to compensate a casual employee for the fact that they do not receive leave entitlements. Their employment contract should clearly state that fact. I'd like to take a moment now to acknowledge the work of ATO Assistant Commissioner John Shepherd. John has led the Tax Office's introduction of single-touch payroll over the last few years and, prior to that, was the program lead for SuperStream. John's leadership of the single-touch payroll implementation has brought with it stakeholder communication, engagement, clarity, and a bit of humour. And employers who have transitioned onto STP have overwhelmingly commented on the relatively seamless nature of the transition. After a long career at the tax office, John is leaving to move on to his next challenge, taking up a role as General Manager of the Industry Statistics Division at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I would like to congratulate John on his appointment to this role and applaud his leadership at the helm of the STP implementation project. We wish John all the best in his new role, and we welcome his successor, Jason Lucchese, who is taking on leadership of STP just in time for tax time. Good luck, Jason. Finally, I hope you were able to attend one of our 6 Payroll Consulting roadshow presentations around the country in late May or early June. Over 600 people across the country heard from a range of speakers covering local and global payroll trends, employment law matters, and guest payroll leaders who shared their personal experiences in payroll transformation. Our next event will be our Payroll Managers Forum on 22 August 2019, held in Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Canberra, Sydney and Brisbane. If you're not already on our database to receive invitations, please go to our website to subscribe, ws.pwc.com.au/payroll. And that's it for this month in payroll. I hope you find our updates useful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of my team or myself at rowan.geddes@pwc.com or via LinkedIn or our website. Thanks very much and have a good month.